Hello, everyone. My name is Yulin Yu. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan. So I'm a computational social scientist who study how data and AI change how we think, we create, and we innovate. So today I will talk about data repurpose in AI study and scientific outcome. This is in collaboration with Dr. Wai An and Dr. Daniel Romero. So data is the cornerstone of scientific advancement. So usually data just presented in a form like showing on the screen, like metadata have a lot of row and have a lot of column. So those type of data serve as a training material for artificial intelligence. So the large language model nowadays all come from those type of data training. And this is also serve as a test bed and evidence of empirical research across scientific domain. And right now, we have a lot of new opportunity in this data-rich society. We have growing volume and investment of data. And nowadays, researchers like us increasingly use the publicly available data set in science as well. So this increased availability of publicly available data could transform the research process. So imagine what is the old challenge for research in 20 or 30 years ago? It's the data. The hardest part is for us to collecting data. We usually use weeks, months, and years to collect those data. But right now, we have our new challenge and opportunity, which is filtering and selecting what data to use in our research. So this leads to our open question. How can we effectively utilize publicly available data to accelerate scientific progress, to reach our end goal of finding those kind of impactful innovation? So prior study usually focus on promoting open access and accessing those kind of data value, which is a very important question. But it does not answer how can data sets can be used effectively after it become open access. So the relationship between data utilization and innovation outcome is not officially set up yet. So for us, I want to ask a question. If we implement or if we finding some of the creative or exploration mechanism in the process of data utilization and innovation outcome, can we simulate this process? So one of my prior work is looking in one of the creative mechanism called recombination, where in the data is we use data which is not usually used together. We call them unusual combination of data set. And this type of unusual combination of data set is associated with more citation and public impact. And we establish the first empirical impact on relationship between creative use of data and innovation outcome. But there are more things to do. So for our study, we only look into data set recombination. So it's only between data. But data use is always tied with other research outcome and component, which is including topic or research content. So one question we want to ask is, can creativity emerge when data interact with research content? And how does it shape innovation? So the creative mechanism I want to look at here is called data repurpose. This idea is actually borrowed from drug repurpose, where a drug is usually created for a certain purpose to cure one disease. But later, people might find out this kind of drug can cure another disease. Putting into the data is a very similar case. Usually, a data set is creating for one task or people use for one purpose. But if we change to a different purpose or different task, can those type of data repurpose contribute to scientific impact? So let me give you an example using a classic data set in computer science called ImageNet. So ImageNet is millions and billions of image, which is with a lot of label like elephant, like shark, and people usually use those type of data set to classify image and do facial recognition or those type of tests. But recently, it has been repurposed to a lot of tests in natural language processing, where people asking using those kind of image to generate a paragraph or write a paragraph and want to generate an image. So this counts as a pretty successful case of data repurpose because right now multimodal field is very hot nowadays. So we ask, is this a typical case? So to answer this question empirically, we first focus on AI domain. There are two reasons. One is like AI right now is like very hot. We want to know what is like how can we stimulate the development of this field. Second, AI domain primarily use like open available data, those kind of public data. So we make it very suitable to study in our case. So we collect more than 10K machine learning paper that collectively use 1.5K benchmark data set. Those are collecting from Open Atlas and paper with code website. So to answer our question, a very important thing is to constructing data repurpose matrix. So to construct this, so we have each paper represented as a vector in the embedding space. So for example, we see paper F and they're using like data ABC will be in one location. And we also have paper P1, P2, P3 are published before paper F, but using at least one data set sharing with paper F. For example, like P2 is using data set AF, and they're sharing the data set A. So for in those kind of embedded space, you can calculate the distance and distance of the semantic space to seeing like how similar contently paper F is similar to like, for example, like P1 paper. So to construct this measurement, we consider two perspectives. One is we calculate the average distance of paper F to paper P1, P2, P3. So we will know averagely like what is the semantic space difference comparing with the paper F and the prior paper they published. Second is we also weighted by the number of data sets they share. So the mathematical representation is showing here, like happy to answer more questions like after. One example about the data repurpose is showing in this visualization. So the high repurpose paper, we can see that the paper P1, P2, P3, which is published before paper F, is much more further distant. But for paper with lower repurpose rates, they will have like much closer distance. So the first innovation outcome we want to look into is called disruption. This measurement captures the extension in which a scientific publication disrupts existing research paradigm. It's like usually used in the science or science domain, but due to time, I won't go too much in detail into this. So the first finding we have is repurposing data is associated with disrupting existing research paradigm. So how do we get this result? So basically the disrupted outcome, it will be our Y variable in the OLS regression, and the data repurpose score we are showing will be in the will be as an independent variable. So for the green bar part you are seeing below, the baseline, like I didn't control any confounder. So you only have two variables, but gradually I control for confounder which have some association with citation or disruption. And at the end, you will see a full control model which is controlling everything. So basically here, like one standard deviation increase in data repurpose score was associated with 10.2 point unit increase in disruption. And the second innovation outcome we're looking into is citation, where measure the degree of immediate recognition in the scientific community. So we use 3-year citation count here. And we're showing a very different result. So data repurposing might not receive immediate recognition in scientific community. One standard deviation increase in the data repurpose score was not significantly associated with the 3-year citation. So putting that together, like data repurpose can reshape a research paradigm, but might not gain immediate attention. So some of the other thing we look into this study is like how widely is data repurpose getting adopted? So we are looking into basically how the paper in the published after paper F, which using similar data set, do they use similar way that like the paper F is also using the data? So briefly, the finding is like data repurpose tend not to be adopted. But we are additionally looking into like who are those kind of data innovators who can successfully repurpose data. So we find industry academia collaboration, larger teams for like higher ranking institute are more likely to produce successful data repurpose paper. So data repurpose is a very distinct creative mechanism beyond our like data recombination paper that shifts scientific direction. But the success really depends on less on like individual bonding, but more on institutional team capability. So thank you very much. And data repurpose might serve essential mechanism driving scientific innovation. But our study, of course, is still association. You move out the first step of exploration. We encourage author, publication, institute, or data curation, an agency to consider the mechanism of data repurpose and use those type of things to like building data infrastructure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, you brought up a lot of issues which many of our audience may not be familiar with. I thought it's a brilliant use of drug repurposing as a marker of innovation. So we have questions at the mic.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Hussaini, Northwestern. So my understanding is that a lot of the data sets that are openly available might have different kinds of licenses or copyrights, or some of them might have been collected with a certain intention. For example, if data is coming from a clinical trial or any kind of empirical effort, the IRB might have, or the consent might have only involved the use of data for a specific purpose. So repurposing might not always be possible. Did you look into those instances where like whether there's any discrepancy between copyrights or licenses of data that has been published and then repurposed, or whether there's any discrepancy in terms of whether the data was actually, whether it was possible to use the data for any other purpose?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, and that is a really, really great question. So for our context, since it's like in the AI domain, all the data is like everybody in the world, you can download that. So those are data that truly like really, really open to everyone. But I really like your perspective about like there are some data set that is openly available, but we need to apply for a different kind of licensing. I think one of the future work they can do is incorporate those kind of factor to see like how does this factor can like impact data repurpose and how hard people can try, and then like how much of this kind of data can reach like similar outcome. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes,
quickly?
there's time.
Great, and I really appreciate the fact that you also highlighted like industry, academia collaboration. And at the same time, I feel like some of those collaborations might not always take into account some of these licensing issues. Like one of the major issues we are having with some of big AI companies is that they used our data and now they're selling our own data to us, charging us for it, you know? So repurposing is not always per se a good thing. It is good as long as it serves a purpose and it takes into account the interests of those who have been involved in the process.
I see. Yeah. So this, I love that comment. So this bring up a very important issue in the AI domain about the ethic use of data. So one of the things I'm thinking about when I do the data recombination paper is this recombination is always like ethical. When we do those kind of recombination, does we consider like what our user actually want us to do? So one other things is like maybe create like, so some of the like future study might maybe not exactly in my domain, is also consider how can we give back to the power to the user itself to let them like, do you agree that we are using your data? Do we agree that you are combining our data? Especially telling them if we are using it for the good purpose, like, and telling them like even like for like different kind of purpose, like that might be possible. So like that would be a beautiful future. Thanks.
Dr. Helfand.
Mark Helfand, Sherwood, Oregon. So most of my questions, which I'm not going to ask a bunch of questions, but they all kind of get at the issue of how you define or limit the idea of repurposing. It's a pretty broad term in some ways, and it's a pretty narrow term in others. So let me just start out. There was a book called Unobtrusive Measures that I read 40 years ago. I don't know if you know the book. Have you heard of it? No. And you know, essentially its point was, and maybe ahead of its time, grocery stores were already generating data about what you bought. A better way to look at nutrition, instead of having, you know, questionnaires trying to get people to remember what they ate, would be to look at grocery receipts. It's an unobtrusive measure too. People don't know that they're being observed. So a data set that was the purpose of which was pretty clearly, you know, stocking and inventory at groceries could be used in health studies. And the book had many examples of this, and it was considered in the social sciences to be a normal concept. That would be ways you would look at something. And a lot of measures in economics, when you're plugging into a regression, you're trying to say, well, what's a good proxy for, sophistication in an urban area or something? Well, maybe it's the size of the airport, and you put these things in. How is this different than that kind of repurposing? Is there something, that seems creative to me too, to use those things. Is this kind of a AI version of that, or is there something I'm missing about what's novel?
Yeah. Thanks for basically bring the question to a more generalized level. So I would say the repurpose I plan to describe here is aligned with the things you just described. In the AI world, basically we can also generalize to a scientific domain about how a data, even in social science or even in biology, is repurposed and then being used by a different domain. That is all possible. Basically, our measurement is capturing how far this data semantically being used by one context, by one group of paper to another paper. So using those type of measurement, I think that we can all capturing basically in the semantic space if the purpose is related to topical, related to topic and related to content. But of course, I think one of the next step or one of the interesting to do is broaden the context to see the purpose is not only come from the natural language perspective, come from the content perspective, but what you were describing to very, very different domain. Yeah.
Thank you. Mike from the internet.
Yes, thanks. Dennis Velez, unclear affiliation, asks about methods or mechanisms to ensure that the repurposed data set is fit to answer a different question.
Sorry, would you mind repeat the question again? Sorry.
Right. How do you know, how do you ensure that the data set is fit for purpose, or that when somebody is repurposing, that it's actually an appropriate, creative, and fit use for that old data set for a new purpose?
I see. That is an excellent question. So in this context of study, we do have some survival bias. So basically, we only study paper, which is already publishing out. So since they already publishing out, basically, this kind of repurpose have some ways of success and at least being recognized for some reviewer for, okay, this is a good way to use that. But I think if for this question, if we can deep a little bit more deeper, for example, if they have some of the pre-registered data set, we can look into and people can repurpose in any way they want. We might observe the part which is not only the survival bias part. So the general answer is, since this is already a published paper, so the success and the proper rate of using it is already reasonably high in that perspective. But of course, we can also look into the other perspective and look deeper into the paper's content and see in an even higher level, is this a proper use, a rigorous use of the data?
And have you done that with your study samples?
Yeah, we haven't done this part. Yeah,
Okay.
but that is a great future direction.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I think, John, are you? Oh, okay. We have back microphone and then front microphone.
Carol Lee, University of Washington. Thank you so much for this creative paper. So now that there are a lot of open data sets, as well as the capacity to use AI to generate papers that combine or at least cite lots of different open data sets, I'm curious whether or not this concept of disruption, how that is related to this, because I could imagine people, maybe cartels, creating new paradigms by coming up with unique or new combinations of data sets and then building on that. And so can you say a little bit about how the notion of disruption may or may not be influenced with this kind of bad actor activity in the future? And maybe could it be possible that the kinds of disruptions that you see in paper mill published papers versus other kinds of papers might be different? The dynamics might be different?
I see. Yeah, thanks for the question. So there are a couple parts of the question, and let me answer the first one, which is, does the AI-generated paper might potentially create those kind of disruption? So I would say that is a really, really interesting question. For our study, we probably won't have that sort of bias since all those paper is probably before 2021, where it's before generative AI come from. But I really love that direction since like even like AI domain right now, they have some of the conferences is specifically for those kind of AI generated paper. So we also observe like, this is one thing I study as well, like how does like AI, which kind of scientific space does AI explore, which kind of scientific space does like human explore? They tend to have a little bit of different pattern. So very likely, like if in a positive sense, like AI can explore something human can never thought of, and then that will be like also one of the very disruptive sense. But I think like the more positive things is like we can see like combining with human, let human do what they are good at, let AI do what they're human, and expand our like exploration like paradigm. So like that is also possible direction of disruption and possible one of the future study as well. And regarding the second and third question, would you mind remind me a bit? Yeah, for what is the other question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just seems like the patterns of clusters of data citations
Mhm.
might become more or less popular depending on how often those get reused, right?
I see.
And with certain kinds of dedicated cartels of authors, they could disproportionately publish in paper mill journals certain patterns, right? So it will look like a new paradigm is emerging, perhaps based on the disruption metric, depending on how that's measured, when really there isn't real science being created or a real scientific paradigm. I'm a philosopher of science. I'm not sure how we would
I see.
identify what a real paradigm is in that case, but something that we wouldn't recognize as legitimate.
I see. So if I simplify like what you just mentioned, basically what you are thinking is at the beginning only a small group of scientists using that kind of data, but later some scientists from a different domain may be using it to study very similar question and then being like recognized by that field, but they actually study very similar things, right?
Yeah,
Is it what?
Yeah, I'll talk to you more about it later. I don't want to hog the mic, but
So we're actually out of time, but John, do you want to use the next person's time for your question or how quick is it?
Very fast.
Okay.
Is there a field adjustment for your citation counts? Because if the repurposing moves to a field that doesn't have a high citation density, you will not really see much of a citation impact.
I see. So the question is how do I justify the citation count or?
Yeah, how do you adjust for field? Because fields have very different numbers of citations.
I see. So this is primarily focused on machine learning paper. So basically the field is like relatively narrow. They do have like different small domain. We do control for the discipline, subdiscipline as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.